Okay, this should be interesting. So the legal fight between Hee-jin, former Adore CEO, and HYBE's sub-label Source Music, which is the agency for Le Seraphim, is intensifying. And the latest development could prove pretty significant. Okay, so on August 22nd, 2025, the Seoul Central District Court admitted Hee-jin's KakaoTalk messages into evidence, official court evidence, in a 5 billion Korean won damages lawsuit filed against her by Source Music. And the decision, I think, could mark a turning point in this case, which has already been highly charged. So let's rewind for a moment to understand how we got here. Okay, so last year, Source Music filed a civil lawsuit against Hee-jin, seeking 5 billion Korean won in damages. And the claims come from three accusations. First, that Hee-jin publicly asserted that she herself had cast the members of NewJeans. And second, that she accused HYBE of breaking its promise to debut NewJeans as the company's first girl group. And third, that she accused Source Music of neglecting the group once they debuted. Source Music has argued that these statements amount to defamation and business obstruction and insult, and that the damage inflicted on the company's reputation is measurable and serious. And at the second hearing back in May, Source Music attempted to strengthen their case by presenting a 20-minute slideshow that included screenshots of Hee-jin's KakaoTalk messages. And Hee-jin's defense, her lawyers, immediately pushed back, arguing that the evidence was obtained illegally without her consent and therefore should be inadmissible. And they've been saying this for months and months. That's the only thing they could say about the KakaoTalk messages. And the dispute set the stage for a heated debate over whether private digital communications can be entered into court records and under what circumstances. And that question was answered, at least for now, at the third hearing. The judge officially ruled that Hee-jin's KakaoTalk messages could indeed be admitted as evidence. And while evidence can be excluded if it's clearly obtained in violation of the Telecommunications Privacy Protection Act, the court emphasized that the circumstances here did not meet that threshold. Okay? Because a staff member had voluntarily provided passwords, the court said, confirmed logins, and even instructed auditors to download the KakaoTalk data before changing them. And against that backdrop, the court determined the acquisition did not amount to a violation and that the messages were therefore legally admissible. 여러 가지 사정을 고려했을 때 통비법 위반에 준하는 경우라 보기 힘들다. 재반 사정에 비춰봤을 때 증거 능력이 있다고 본다. That's what the court said in Korean. Now, this ruling lands with extra weight because it undercuts one of Hee-jin's central defenses. Since last year, her representatives, lawyers, and PR agencies, also known as McCall consulting firms, had repeatedly insisted that the KakaoTalk chats, were illegally leaked or the result of unauthorized laptop seizures, even warning news outlets to delete articles or face civil and criminal lawsuits. Yet, the actual record revealed in court filings show that Adore staff at the time cooperated with HYBE's audit. And I think that will be the vice president, VP, Lee Sang-woo of Adore at the time. So he allegedly cooperated with HYBE's audit, handing over passwords willingly and approving access step by step. In fact, we have already seen these conversations that happened between the VP Lee Sang-woo and the auditors, right? So he willingly handed over the passwords. And in fact, transcripts of those interactions were distributed to reporters at the time. And what was framed publicly as coercion or theft now looks, at least in the eyes of the court, like it looks like voluntary disclosure. And by admitting the KakaoTalk messages, the court didn't just settle a technical point of evidence law. It effectively punctured the narrative that Minijin and her legal team had been pushing for months, that the chats were off limits because they were obtained improperly or illegally. Instead, the messages now carry the full weight of courtroom legitimacy, ensuring they will remain central to the case as it unfolds. Now, of course, this decision did not come without resistance from Minijin's side. Her lawyers argued that reading these messages aloud in court, even without a slideshow presentation, would create essentially the same impact, like an invasion of her communications privacy. They stressed that the contents had little to do with the case itself. But the judge was not persuaded, stating that the court cannot preemptively block arguments without knowing their substance. Okay? Interestingly, Source Music countered by pointing out that Minijin herself had, in the past, disclosed and read KakaoTalk messages during a lengthy 2-hour press conference. Remember this one? Yeah, time flies. It's been over a year. And Source Music framed her current objections as inconsistent, suggesting that now that unfavorable messages were in play, she was attempting to shield them from scrutiny. As Source Music put it, when we submit messages unfavorable to the defendant, suddenly it becomes unfair pressure. But yeah, 이제 와서 저희가 피고에게 불리한 메시지를 제출하니 부당한 압박, PT를 제한해달라고 주장한 것이 아니야. But whether or not we quote them directly, this is simply a lawful exercise of our right to argue, Source Music side said. Now, the judge ultimately drew a line. While Source Music abandoned the idea of presenting the messages through a public PowerPoint, the court permitted oral argument and reading of the contents. And with that, the KakaoTalk messages officially became part of the evidentiary record, which set the stage for their role in upcoming arguments. Now, the day's hearing closed with this ruling, and both sides left with plenty to consider. I'm pretty sure the next round is scheduled for November 7th, 2025 at 4:30 p.m., where I'm pretty sure the legal clash is likely to intensify further. Now, it's worth noting that this lawsuit with Source Music is not the only legal battle that Minijin is fighting. She is also engaged in litigation with Belief Lab, another HYBE subsidiary, which is the agency for NHYPEN and Islet. And this adds more layers of complexity to her ongoing confrontation with whatever. Now, what does this mean then? I feel like on one hand, the acceptance of KakaoTalk messages into evidence significantly strengthens Source Music's position. And also, on the other hand, Minijin may try to limit how the content is used or interpreted in open court. Because, beyond the courtroom walls, the case continues to shape public perception about HYBE, about NewJeans, and about Minijin herself. And the real question now is how far these messages will go in influencing the outcome. Will they simply provide color to Source Music's claims, or could they become the decisive factor in a case worth billions? In this case, between Source Music and Minijin is $5 billion, right? And that's what everyone will be watching, I guess, as the trial moves forward. But yeah, it's pretty significant that the court and the judge accepted these as evidence. Pretty much shutting down Minijin's arguments. Now let's talk about these KakaoTalk messages. So if you remember, when NewJeans KakaoTalk messages first surfaced in mid 2024 last year, the reaction was pretty explosive, both domestically and internationally, because like what started as a few leaked lines quickly grew into a spiraling record, and the picture it painted was anything but flattering. In some exchanges, she went so far as to insult her own artist, that is, NewJeans members, calling one NewJeans member fat. And the language that she used in Korean language was more violent than fat. Fat is an understatement, which is a comment that many fans, I hope many fans, immediately recognized and condemned. Although I see some fans, or I would rather call them NewJeans supporters, try to overlook entirely. And in other exchanges, she and her associates sketched out ways to put pressure on HYBE, whether through regulators, like government authorities, sympathetic media outlets, or even by encouraging NewJeans parents to file official complaints. And the goal, at least as the chats suggested, wasn't about legal wins. It was rather about leverage, so that she could pressure HYBE into giving up and letting her go, and letting her and NewJeans go. And there were some stranger elements too. Like if you remember, she leaned heavily on a shaman, not only when choosing the name Adore over her earlier preference, All Joy, but even in decisions about which trainees to select. Yeah, that was a shocker. She also talked big about NewJeans' value, tossing out numbers in the how much, like hundreds of billions on one, and brushing off colleagues who thought she was overshooting. She even thought that the value of NewJeans at 800 billion Korean won is not that much. It's pretty little. And woven into all of this were hints of outside investors, like with KakaoTalk Entertainment's name surfacing more than once. Specifically, the president at the time, the Kim Sung-soo, president of Kakao Entertainment, Kim Sung-soo. And this raised questions about how far she was willing to go in building her own power base. But perhaps the most damaging revelation was about NewJeans themselves, because for years, the group was celebrated as NewJeans' brainchild, yet the KakaoTalks told a different story. NewJeans had already been assembled inside Source Music as a 7-member debut team, complete with training and choreography for their debut track, Attention. And the chats suggested NewJeans maneuvered to pull 6 of them into Adore, effectively taking control of a group that was already nearly finished. And for a lot of people, for critics, all of this amounted to proof of arrogance, proof of betrayal, and proof of poor judgment. And NewJeans' responses didn't help. She insisted the conversations were private and illegally leaked or taken out of context. But what she never said, not once, was that they were fake. And that silence spoke louder than any denial. Because if they were indeed fake, she could have, and she would have, and she should have sued all the journalists who have released these KakaoTalk messages in their articles. Now, as I mentioned before, the next hearing is set for November 7th, 2025, 4:30 p.m. KST. But the long arc of this controversy may already be written, because if I remember correctly, some reports already suggested that more than 58,000 KakaoTalk messages were preserved on HYBE servers, of which only a fraction has surfaced. And if I remember correctly, I think they said something like the messages that haven't been revealed are even worse than what we have seen. So, and if the hundreds already released have had this much impact, then the prospect of further revelation looms like a storm cloud for NewJeans. Now, for MHA, the legal question is whether her statements meet the threshold for defamation or obstruction, at least in this case with Source Music. But for the public and for observers, K-pop fans, the question is simpler. Can someone who spoke this way about her own artist and her company and her rivals still be trusted? The answer, at least in the court of opinion, at least from my perspective, seems increasingly clear. The KakaoTalks have already reshaped her image. From once upon a time, she was praised as this, trailblazing creative director, but now she has become this figure whose private words have become the most public evidence of all. So I'll open this to you. As always, before wrapping up, what do you guys think will happen? I'm pretty sure many of you will mention something about the shaman, who the shaman is. Who knows if there's some interesting materials, trustworthy materials that we can look into. I'll make follow-up videos about it. And what do you think will happen in this case between NewJeans and Source Music? And do you think there will be some KakaoTalk messages that we haven't seen that might affect the court decisions? So yeah, but when you discuss, as always, let's stay positive, respectful, and classy. See you guys. Peace and love. Bye-bye. Peace.